Hey everyone, hello. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Zosia. I'm a content specialist here at Manta, and today's webinar is very special for us. It will be held by Ernie Austic, Manta's Senior Vice President of Products. And today, Ernie will tell you all about leveraging data lineage to meet the demands of analytics and compliance. This session is very special for us because Ernie was supposed to give this presentation at the Enterprise Data World Conference in San Diego. However, the conference has been postponed. And today's webinar should take us around 30 minutes. We also planned a Q&A part as well. So if you have any questions during the presentation, please open the Q&A window that you will find at the bottom bar and type your questions there. So Ernie, please go ahead.
Thank you, Zosia. And thank you everyone for joining us, especially during this challenging time. We appreciate that you're spending this 30 minutes with us to talk about Lineage and how it can be leveraged in your enterprises. And we hope that all of you are healthy and safe where you are. I certainly had hoped to be able to present this in San Diego and meet some of you, and I certainly hope we get that opportunity in the future. So let us take a look at our agenda. So the first thing we're going to do is talk about everyone's black box that obscures the details of the data pipelines within your enterprise and makes it difficult to see exactly how data is flowing throughout your organization. And after we go through that definition, we're going to take a look at some use cases and specifically see how our customers leverage Lineage to meet their demands for analytics and compliance, and then more specifically, accomplish each of these goals of simplifying consumption for everyone in their organization, highlighting calculations and details where needed, to enhance productivity of IT with faster delivery and reliability, to enable Lineage history to understand what's happening or what happened in the past, and ultimately to increase trust in data and the results of that analysis. So let's begin. How big is your black box? All of your enterprises, you have sources and targets, landing areas, calculations, programs, scripts of every kind throughout those systems. And trying to understand what they're actually doing with your data throughout that landscape is very challenging. And there's often blockages. And this is an analogy, of course, but if the applications you're using have been around for a long time, if you've done mergers and acquisitions and acquired other applications along the way, there's often some piece of that data pipeline that you can't see into. And even if you can see into some of it, there's often still some that's hidden. Perhaps you're loading data, for example, into a Hadoop environment, and you might know where it comes from and how it gets to that platform and how it actually gets inserted into Hadoop, and even how it comes out of Hadoop into your reporting environment. But maybe you still can't see what's happening inside of that world. The same thing is true for packaged applications, or as I mentioned before, applications that you have acquired as companies merge and come together. So how do you provide visibility, and why? And to whom throughout your organization? So let's look at ways to leverage Lineage, and we'll start with simplifying consumption. This is about making Lineage available to everyone in the organization and doing it in a way that they can understand it. So first and foremost, the Lineage solutions that you look at need to have a visual metaphor. Something like the graphic that you see here, which happens to be the Lineage as rendered in the Manta solution, but it needs to be a rendering that can zoom in, zoom out, that can move back and forth because these lineages can get much larger than what you see here. It needs to be color coded to help you appreciate where you are in looking at the assets across your enterprise. And it needs to be rendered at the appropriate level. Business users may just need to see that they have a collection system for customer information and financial reporting. They might just have 2 boxes and they're perfectly happy. But other users that need to drill down may have a requirement to see data at the individual element level or column name, if you're on the technical side, within a database, so you can see exactly how the data is flowing at that lowest point. It needs to be available to everyone. Most of the tooling in this area is browser-based, but it's extremely critical that it can be accessed by all within the organization and accessible in the tooling and solutions that you have already been working on within your organization. Many of you are using governance tools and catalogs that are focused on many other things than just Lineage. So it's important that your Lineage solution not only can render Lineage on its own, as it can here, as you see, but also be able to promote that Lineage into the governance solution, if you've standardized on one, that you've chosen for your users. It's also critical that we can see details. In our earlier example about visibility of the black box, we often hear from customers who say that they have to have a long litany of emails and a chain of Slack messages and phone calls if someone sees a report and doesn't understand how something is calculated. And these emails and Slack messages can go on until they finally reach the person that can look at the calculation deep in the code and explain how a figure was derived. So Lineage solution needs to surface that information as simply as possible, making it available to the general user so that we don't always have to pull code back from archive and find someone with the appropriate skill sets to dive into it to actually see how it was calculated, like this example here in the green circle where you can see that full name was calculated in a particular way. And this is a simple example, but it's an illustration of how, regardless of the technology, that it's important that calculations be made available to all so we can understand how critical metrics are derived and feel more comfortable with the reporting solution that we're using. Productivity in IT is also critical, and we use Lineage, leverage Lineage to improve that productivity. And the first way is delivering things more quickly. One of our largest financial customers, faced with a ground to cloud migration, having several thousand tables in a relational database, almost an equally large number of ETL programs and scripts, and over 100 reports. And they wanted to be able to get ROI out of their cloud solution. So they're migrating to cloud, but they just simply had no idea how to begin. And they knew that if they did a sort of big bang movement of everything at once, it would take them well over 18 months. So once they were able to realize that out of those hundreds of reports, there was about 17 of them that were especially critical and needed to be high priority, they were able to use Lineage to determine what the subset of ETL scripts and programs were that were needed, and the subset of the several thousand tables that were needed in the database, and therefore phase their migration to the cloud and get more faster, immediate return on that investment. The second part of productivity is making sure you don't break anything. So if someone chooses to make changes to the table or a program, it needs to know what it might break downstream, or who should they notify that there might be a system outage. Can do a lot to your overall productivity within the organization. And next, and equally important, is history. Now, those of us who have been supporting business intelligence applications have all been in situations where an analyst with their hair on fire comes running into the room in a panic and says, I need to know what our risk exposures, how they were calculated at the end of Q3 last year. Well, be sure that your Lineage solution is able to simply go back and look at the lineage as it might have been at that time at the end of Q3 in 2019. And perhaps even more important, be able to do an actual comparison. So you could see, as we show in that lower diagram with the different colored lines and different illustrations of B date and date birth, but be able to see the differences in a particular code selection and how lineage was defined at that point in time versus now. This can help us understand where problems may have occurred, especially if you're doing root cause analysis, but also give guidance as to perhaps changes that were put in one place and really should have been also put in others. And finally, trust. Lineage strengthens and solidifies your efforts in governance to achieve overall trust in data. And the ultimate goal is to help your management teams make more accurate, confident decisions faster. And if they trust the data, that's going to help them a great deal. And Lineage is going to help them achieve that trust because they'll have a better comfort level of where data comes from, who and what touches it along the way, and how it's being manipulated. And your decision makers and data scientists, whether they're using Excel spreadsheets or advanced machine learning and predictive analytics, they deserve to have a clear view of the journey of their data and where it comes from and how it has been impacted along the way. So let's take another look at the black box. So ultimately, the goal is to shrink or eliminate your black boxes. And it could be an ongoing process as acquisitions don't stop. There's always new code that's being developed and new systems. But the goal that Lineage can assist you with is to build new systems faster and ensure reliability, to provide appropriate levels of detail and always be able to support historical analysis and queries, and increase trust in all of the data-related activities that you do within your enterprise, so that your black boxes become more clear and you can see the actual paths of data and the variables that potentially raise questions or concerns are eliminated, and people can make those accurate decisions confidently much more quickly. Thank you. Are there any questions? Zosha?
Yes, we had some really good questions coming throughout the webinar, so let's get you some answers, guys. So the first question is, does Manta support RDF data lineages such as MarkLogic and Neo4j?
So that's a really great question. And today, to support Lineage for certain databases that we don't have out-of-the-box scanners for, we offer an ability to create Lineage through a custom facility that makes it very easy to define specific nodes or specific, islands or assets within a particular lineage path. And in this, in case of some object types, it's often something that we would deduce from other scripting. So if there is a ETL program or SQL that is parsed, that is looking at a particular source that does not have lineage of its own, then we'll be able to render that particular source or target directly. So it really depends on whether there are stored procedures or ETL code within it that we might look at. Otherwise, we would obtain that through the programs that we're parsing. We actually look specifically at code. That's the methodology that we use to determine lineage. Some people call that a reverse engineering of code. Some call it encoded or parsed lineage, where we're looking at actual scripts or the actual syntax of a SQL statement or the syntax of an ETL tool. Thank you, good question.
Thank you. Another question, can you tell me how I would run an impact analysis with Manta?
So the question is, how would we run an impact analysis with Manta? Impact analysis, and this is not a sort of absolute definition from an industry perspective, but generally speaking, people often think of impact analysis as downstream lineage reporting. So that what I'm really trying to do is to now say, here I have a table or a stored procedure or an ETL script that's somewhere way upstream, or to the typical scenario, to the left in my diagram. And I want to edit it, change it, maintain it in some way. And so impact analysis is the lineage result of looking to the right or looking downstream to see all the things that it might affect if I was to remove that object or change it, make a transformation change, and want to see all the different reports that it's used in so that I could see what that effect might be.
Thank you. Another question, what are some regulatory compliance standards you currently help with?
Certainly the most pressing one in everyone's mind right now is GDPR and CCPA for data privacy. But a large number of our customers in the financial space have been using our Lineage tooling to help them with their challenges around BCBS 239. And this is the Basel II requirement that came out several years ago, where financial institutions need to show to the government and their regulators how they have calculated risk and their exposure to risk, certainly in the loan area, but be able to illustrate to the regulators that they are in control and very aware of the data that is feeding their algorithms. Lineage points them to that source information so they can show this to the regulators and demonstrate that they know exactly which tables and which files the data comes from, and then can, equally demonstrate that they have people that are managing it, that they understand the quality of that data, and more.
Here's another question. It's an interesting one. Is there a way to share the results of a lineage map with my colleagues?
Great question. There are multiple ways that we can share the lineage results, or you could share the lineage results with your colleagues. Our tooling provides the ability to create what we call a permalink, so that you could actually grab a hyperlink, give it to someone, and that way, because it's identifying a particular object, they'll be able to go directly into our solution to actually see what the lineage looks like for that object at some other point in time. However, there are several methods, other methods as well. It's very easy to create a graphic. So if you needed to actually generate the graphical picture of the lineage and put it into a document or something else, we provide some very easy ways to create a PNG file. And there are also ways to export the entire lineage in a set of appropriate export files. They're actually CSV files that many of our customers will then take and use to do additional reporting and analysis from that.
Okay, thank you. How is Manta different from my current data governance solution? We currently use Calibra.
Very, very good question. And one of the things that we pride ourselves at Manta is being focused on the discipline and the issues surrounding data lineage. And so we complement tools such as Calibra and others in the catalog space. And we do everything optionally for our customers to load lineage that we have determined or gone through in that parsing exercise I talked about earlier, and push it up into Calibra, where it can be used at the larger governance scale. And tools like Calibra have a glossary, they have wonderful workflow, and things for the larger, broader governance domain that we are not focused on, because we are really sticking to the issues surrounding lineage, the technologies that are needed for it, and ways such as history of taking better advantage of that lineage. So we complement Calibra and tools like it.
Thanks. Another one, how do timestamps of lineage/revisions help with data process and control?
Very, very good question. At the very lightest point, revisions simply help you go back and do a time slice. It's like traveling through time. However, being able to analyze the revisions and the revision history is something that's equally critical. Being able to automatically identify changes in lineage that occur as you take these time slices is something that would provide a lot of value, especially if you're trying to keep track of a particular item or a particular area, maybe the tables in one particular schema. And so you need to monitor that between revisions and actually see where the changes are and notify the appropriate folks if a change has occurred that maybe shouldn't have. So various patterns of control could be implemented by taking revision comparisons, and revision comparisons can be done within our user interface. They can be done through a REST API that we fully document and support for looking at particular changes in history. And so that would be the way I would see most people using this for control.
Thank you. Another question, in IGC, do you guys integrate directly with the assets that already exist in the metadata repository, or do you guys create new assets generated from our connectors?
That's a fantastic question. I assume that we're referring here to IBM's IGC, or Information Governance Catalog. The Information Governance Catalog from IBM, as do all the other catalog vendors that we work with, often have their own mechanism for bringing in what you might call the static metadata from the databases. So they have already brought that information in from Oracle, DB2, Microsoft SQL Server, Netezza, etc. And they do that for a reason, because they're helping you govern it. You might be establishing stewards and glossary terms and all kinds of other added value metadata. So as we understand the lineage that occurs between these assets with ETL tools such as DataStage or Informatica or Talend or the complex scripts that are in PL SQL, we also have to know about these sources and targets, but that becomes our reconciliation point. So we know that a particular schema, table, column from a database is used, and we match that to the naming convention that is used within IGC or other catalog tools, and that becomes the point of connection. And so we do everything in our power to make that match, and we don't actually promote new objects into IGC or other catalog tools because that would risk the threat of possibly having duplicates. So we do everything in our power to reconcile that correctly, depending upon the naming conventions you've used within IGC or other tools.
Great. Another question we got in our chat. Does Manta also plan to incorporate ontologies visualization in its future roadmap?
That's a very good question. And from a Manta perspective, we do bring in logical models as they appear in tools such as Irwin and similar design tools. But it is not within our goal to really go down the path of being an ontology. We are really focused, laser focused on Lineage and what Lineage can provide. And so we're not trying to challenge the kind of catalog glossary space where some of the ontology work goes on with more complex hierarchies. We are looking at ways to create higher level aggregate views of Lineage, but we are making a particular stance not to get ourselves involved with the ontologies. We believe that there are tools that do that extremely well, and our Lineage complements those types of tools.
Okay, we have another one. It's a very hot topic. How does this help with remote workers? Our organization is currently all work from home due to the situation and having challenges with communication.
Excellent question. And I believe that this is an area that certainly all of us are facing challenges with. But we believe that this will help immensely, especially in those situations where we can't run down the hall to talk to the DBA or to the programmer. I mentioned earlier about the long chain of emails and phone calls and Slack messages and instant messaging that goes on as people try to research a particular Lineage issue or problem. And better than doing email would be if you could just take the elevator down 2 floors and run down to the corner office and talk to the DBA or to the ETL developer directly. But that's not always possible. So the conditions that we're all under now are introducing new challenges. But organizations, as they've been growing, certainly have developers that are scattered across all parts of the world and across all kinds of time zones. And having the ability to see Lineage in an easily consumable fashion without having to make 100 phone calls is going to help immensely.
Okay, we have 2 more questions. I didn't see one of them before, and it's from the same person, so I'm gonna ask both of them. The first one is, do you guys have Spark 2 connectors? And the second one, did you say that there was also some way to also integrate manual Lineage from Manta, sort of how you do with Fast Track?
So it sort of has to do with Fast Track, was that the word?
Yes.
At the end? Okay, so the first one relative to Spark technologies. Spark technologies are an active part of our research right now. We don't have an absolute date. We're still looking at different ways that this can be accomplished. Spark and Python are 2 of our perhaps most high-level research areas at this moment. We do have quite a few scanners that are on our schedule for this year, as well as a lot of other things that we're doing to enhance the usage of Lineage. But Spark and Python, please stay in touch with us and revisit it because they are certainly, hot in our research plate. We just haven't come up with an actually confirmed date. Now, as far as Fast Track is concerned, I am familiar with Fast Track from my previous experiences with IBM. And I believe you're talking to the mapping capability that Fast Track provides to map a set of columns into another set of columns through a graphical interface. Today, Manta has a very easy ability to do custom mappings, very similar. We actually have a way of cascading those mappings, which is important in a replication scenario. So if you have an entire schema that's in one database that's being replicated with some of the popular change data capture and replication tools that are out there, you could just define it at the schema level and say schema A is connected to schema B, and if it has hundreds of tables and thousands of columns that all match each other because it effectively is the same database, we'll actually instantly make that lineage mapping and that connection. We are looking at ways to have something be as graphical and drag and drop as you see in Fast Track. But right now, we can accomplish the same thing through very easy to manipulate CSV files.
Great. Looks like we answered all of the questions. So Ernie, thank you very much for the presentation and answering all the questions. And I want to thank everyone for joining today's webinar. Soon you'll find the recording in your inboxes. Please make sure to check out our website, getmanta.com, and to follow our social media, so LinkedIn and Twitter, to stay informed about our future webinars. Thanks again and stay safe. Bye.
Thank you.